Okay, we're going to get started. We now have a quorum.
Okey-doke.
So I will call to order the workshop meeting of the Park District of Highland Park at 6:04 p.m. Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein.
Here.
Commissioner Grossberg. Commissioner Flor-Swicekoff.
Here.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
I'm here.
President Kaplan.
All right, well, we have a quorum, and I know that Terry is going to be here soon. So at this point, I'm going to go out of order on the agenda. And why don't we start with Marilyn Peters? Do you mind presenting? You're back there hiding. Do you want to make your two presentations? Caught her off guard, didn't I?
Start with the resolution.
Mm-hmm. And the record will show that Commissioner Grossberg is here.
Yes, he is.
Are you still happy with your reverse order?
Absolutely.
You saved the best for first.
Perfect. All right. I always go last, so this is wonderful. Okay, so the first thing we have is Resolution 2020-03 authorizing a contract with the lowest cost electricity provider. Currently, all of our facilities, except for the rec center, receive electricity that is brokered via eQuantum Consulting LLC. The rec center, since 2018, we took over an agreement that had been brokered there through the Northern Illinois Municipal Electric Collaborative, also known as NIMIC. We share a meter at that building, and so we assumed that bill in 2018. We charge back the city 20% for the electricity used. We were informed that that agreement is expiring at the end of February, so we need to do something just for the rec center as far as electricity, because the rest of our agreements don't expire until the end of 2021. So this collaborative has 170 park districts and other municipalities in Northern Illinois. They all combine together and they go out to get a bid for the lowest price for electricity. It all happens on one day, which is coming very soon at the end of February. And so what happens is they go out for bid first thing in the morning to get a price for that, for the electric, for up to 3 years out. Then there's a call, 1 or 2 that afternoon, to go over the lowest bids, and then we would have to decide by the end of the day if we are going to accept that bid or not. So what this resolution asks of you is to authorize Brian and myself to participate in the consortium with the other 170 members or so, and go with the bid, the lowest bid that is presented that day, and sign up for it. And then you would vote on that at the March meeting for final approval. But I mean, we would be pretty much committed to that contract at that time. We're going to make the contract so that it expires at the end of 2021, so that at that point all of our electricity will be expiring, and we'll just be in a consistent cycle with the same company for all the facilities. We also ran this past a legal counsel. He has several clients that are part of this consortium as well, and they're all very happy with it and feel that they would not get the rates that they do get, if they went out on their own, or in our case, if we went on our own for just one facility. And so that's why staff is recommending that we approve this resolution at the board meeting later this month. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any questions? I do have one question.
Okay.
I want to make it clear. Okay, this is just for the rec center.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start implementing solar energy, that will be a different characterization of our purchasing agreements, and this won't be affected by it because we're not doing the rec center at first.
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we were coordinating these things.
I have actually that brings up a good point. On is the rec center separately metered from the clubhouse?
No, so that's why we charge them back 20% of the electricity at the end of each year.
Okay, so is the city can participate in this, or they?
The city is actually the one that offered me the invitation to join the collaborative, because this was their agreement that we took over in 2018, so we had to finish it out through now. And so when it was expiring, the collaborative, the man that dealt with the city actually didn't really realize that we had taken over things. So Ramesh at the city reached out to Brian actually, then asked if, we wanted to meet and discuss it and see if we wanted to join the collaborative.
Okay, it's nice that you're working so well together, so I'm very happy, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Well, let's then move on to review of vouchers, I said.
Okay, all right.
Must be something wrong there.
Okay, so in the voucher packet this month, we had the checks written from January 23rd through February 6th for about $300,000. We had bank drafts for about $80,000, and then P cards of about $150,000, which come up to just over $500,000. Did anyone have any questions on those?
No, and I did review them, and they're consistent with our policies. All right. Shall we now go back to the order of the agenda? And are there
Thank
any,
you.
I'm sorry? Are there any additions to the agenda from any of the commissioners or the board or staff? No? All right, so then we will go to Rosewood Beach update.
Jeff?
Jeff Smith.
All right, thank you very much. So, at our January workshop meeting, Margaret Boschek from Smith Group had returned to talk further with the board about some longer-term solutions for erosion control at Rosewood Beach. And she had went through 3 main options. So, since then, staff have continue to explore those options, and so tonight what we're going to do is share with the board some of the staff's opinions on the options based on each cove specifically, because as she had stated before, the approach we take in each cove may not necessarily be the same. So I wanted to start by briefly reviewing the options that she had discussed with the board in January. The first one was an underwater weir, and so what you're looking at here is a cross-section. This would be stone down at the bottom in the water. That red line is the average water level. And then right here is the top, so basically what we're at right now. And then if you see this here, this is just showing it just in the interpretive cove. The idea would there would be submerged rock in between the gap in the cove. And what would happen here is a wave would break down wave energy as it's coming through, and then which would help actually retain sand in the cove further than what it's doing right now. So let me go back to that. Now, one of the concerns or comments about this approach is when water levels recede, if they do, at some point that rock could be submerged, and it is very much a barrier for keeping sand within the cove. And so over time, the cove would fill up with sand more. So if you were to do something like this in a swimming cove, at some point you potentially would have to exit the cove to actually swim, plus the rock would be a barrier. The next one here was the reduced gap. So you're looking at a cross-section again of stone. The average water level is right here. And so with this one, oh, going the wrong way. All right. So the idea here is that you would be extending these breakwaters in to minimize the opening right here, and once again would help break up additional wave energy, and as a result would help to retain some of the sand in here. So as you can see with the notes on the side, this would be construction by a barge, and it would also retain sand, and over time you would, if the water levels were reduced, you would start to get a larger beach. But the thought with this one is that it would not completely fill in with sand. You would still have some sort of a cove there, depending.
Can I just ask quickly,
Please.
the reason for the price raise is mostly because they have to work from a barge?
It's that, and it's the material as well.
That's right.
And then the third option that she had discussed was a revetment along the back of the beach. So along the Interpretive Center building, there is a sheet pile wall. And I'll talk a little more about that in a minute, but imagine this is that wall here, and in front of it, with the lake out over here to the right, you have stone along here as an additional revetment. You can see it right here along that area. So this is an approach that is protecting the infrastructure, such as the building or the parking lot, or what we would choose to protect. It does not work to retain any additional sand. We would continue to have the erosion that we've had based on the water levels. So this is taking a little bit of a different approach and just focusing on the infrastructure and maintaining the back of the beach. That makes sense. All right, so real quickly, here were the initial cost estimates for these broken down by each of the three coves. And I do want to stress that at this phase, these are very much conceptual, and these opinions of probable costs are based on those concepts. If and when we choose to move forward with a particular one, those costs are going to be more refined. We'll have a much better feel what that cost could be. At this point, I can't say if that means for a particular option in a particular cove, whether the cost would go up or down, but it's likely those costs could alter a little bit. All right, so with that said, what I would like to do is go through each of the coves. I was going to start with the interpretive cove, talk a little bit about, share the staff's feedback, and then open it up for questions from the board, and then we'd move on to the next cove. So this is a photo of the interpretive cove just a few weeks ago. And you can see here with the new sand that we had placed in there is doing exactly what we've hoped it would do. So the priorities for this cove are education. We also have facility rentals, programming, primarily in the building, and the question about what's at risk if we continue to experience severe erosion in this cove would obviously be the building, it would be the parking lot, and with the parking lot being the main means of access to the site. Also, it's kind of tough to see, but we have the chaise lounge and little boardwalk lookout area right here. So, I got ahead of myself. So for this cove, the underwater weir and the reduced gap are approaches that staff felt could work in this cove, but an approach of a revetment would likely be a little more of a wise approach, as the focus of this cove is not swimming as it is in some of the other coves. There isn't as much recreation in this area, and we feel that obviously the importance of the parking lot in the building and further protecting that infrastructure. So what had further been discussed with Smith Group was adding an additional stone revetment in front of this building. So as I said, there's a sheet pile wall that does protect the building. However, if we were to get higher water levels and down the road experience erosion similar to what we had this summer, but over a longer period of time, having that additional stone will further protect the building and will not cause any undercutting of that sheet pile wall. We're also looking at it in a sense that if we were not to do a structure offshore that continued to help contain the sand, and that sand were to erode, you would have a structure there also that would help with the immediate drop-off. And then, along the parking lot, what is being proposed by Smith Group at this time would be a sheet pile wall rather than a stone revetment. And the reason for that is, since the last meeting, they've done some additional calculating. In order to put a stone revetment in here that would be effective enough in front of the boardwalk, it would have to be much higher than that boardwalk area. Obviously, it would be a little bit of an issue. Now, one area that is of potential concern in the future is what we talked about earlier, this chaise lounge and overlook area right here. So if the district had moved in the direction of putting in these revetments, there could be a point, if erosion continued severely, that we would have to consider removing this. And the thought was that the sheet pile wall would go along the parking lot, as that's what we're really focusing on protecting. Now, you can see this is a recent photo. Like I said, a lot of the material has moved around and shifted, but we are still getting significant protection where before we had probably about 5 feet down here that was exposed. So the initial cost estimate for the back revetment and the interpretive cove was $342,000. And actually, before I open this up for question, there's one thing I meant to mention earlier was just to remind the board, for our capital budget, there are some dollars that were budgeted for this year for Rosewood Beach. We had $200,000 in there for revetment, and then in 2021, we had anticipated spending more. In 2021, we were proposing $600,000, and that is this thought that we'd be planning and possibly moving forward with some revetment. And then for beach nourishment, we had $350,000 in the budget. So long story short, we have a little over $500,000 that's currently budgeted if we need to address immediate needs at Rosewood this year.
Jeff, could I ask you to go back one picture?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, two. What about the gap between the building and the sheet pile?
Exactly. This is something that would be further explored, but at this time, working with Smith Group, they felt that putting just the sheet pile here and the stone revetment is completely fine, as there wasn't any infrastructure back here they were concerned about, and they're not concerned about the bluff at this point.
What about the boardwalk that's between the, leading to the parking lot?
So the understanding is that the piles are deep enough in this area that while we could have some washout here, we could be, down the road even forced to put a railing or something up that structurally the boardwalk would be fine there. But that is certainly would be an option. If we chose to further explore this, then we could potentially extend that along here.
Okay.
But this is looking at it from more of a cost-effective approach as well, balancing that. And so before I do open up for questions, I'll say that the next step for this cove would be to move through construction documents for this, and that's where we would work out the details on it. That would be bringing Smith Group on for that. This is one that obviously none of us can predict the future, but if we had a worst case scenario and we had significant erosion, we would possibly consider doing this work, let's say, in the fall if we felt that we needed to. So in order to be prepared to do the work, or possibly federal funding came available or something like that, and we were poised to do the work, we would want to move forward with construction documents so we could move forward with it as needed, and also go through the permitting process. We do feel at this point that it's most likely that we would be able to get the permits approved in time to do the work in fall if that's something we wanted to do. With that said, any comments or questions about this cove in particular?
You mentioned, Zoran,
Of course.
you mentioned that the sand is doing what it's supposed to do. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So when we put in this new material, it was a little bit of a larger grain sand, and the idea is that we are looking for something that would be a little more stable. Obviously, with the storms we're having in the lake levels we have right now, every storm is essentially an intense storm, and it's going to move almost anything around. After the winter storm, we had a large tree on the cove there. But with that said, the idea was that this sand would flatten out and try to find a little bit of a happy place. And you can see here, that's exactly what's happening. We're not having these significant drop-offs. And so what we are preparing for, though, is if we were to have higher lake levels, like I said, we don't know what could happen, but seeing the erosion that we had in the past, in the future, we could have significantly more erosion. But at this point, we are confident going into the summer that we will still have somewhat of a beach that people can access.
Okay.
Bernie? Can you explain how the sheet pile revetment would work?
How the sheep pile revetment
Yeah.
will work? I will do my best.
Okay.
But I will say that Smith Group will be the best to really answer the questions along it. So the idea with that, once again, that revetment would go along here. It would be sized and driven in the ground enough that we'd be robust enough that it could withstand the waves. If it were to, let's say, completely down the road, completely ever wash out, and then that boardwalk section in front of it had been removed, then we would be able to have just that there and not need anything further. So it would be sized for that. And then in the future, if we had an issue and we needed to install, let's say, a boardwalk along, a railing along this boardwalk, we could do that as well.
So is the sheet pile revetment, that will not curtail topping, but it will protect the actual foundation of the parking lot?
Oh, yeah, sorry. It would
Yes.
it would retain the parking lot, exactly. It's something so that the parking lot would not be undermined and wash out, or let's see.
So worst case scenario of high lake waters, high lake levels, and a big northeaster with 12, 13, 14-foot waves, there could still be topping.
Absolutely.
So the water could be in the parking lot, but the foundation of the parking lot would be secured.
Exactly.
So it shouldn't be damaged under that scenario.
That's correct.
And that's similar how the sheet pile revetment is now working at the interpretive center.
That's correct.
It's protecting the foundation, not necessarily prohibiting topping.
Absolutely, it won't protect, it's not going to come above, you won't see it.
So can you explain what the benefit of doing the additional rock or revetment in front of the interpretive center versus what's already existing?
So it would be similar idea. So this, if it's you've noticed that the parking lot is set a little further
Yeah.
back, and then unfortunately, the because of the infrastructure here, and like I said, from the calculations that have been done so far, there simply wasn't a way to put a rock revetment in addition in front of the sheet pile without putting it well above
Yeah.
the ground level. So the sheet pile would be sized deeper and larger than the sheet pile is here. So once again, here, it's just going to provide additional protection, breaking up that wave energy, so it's not just hitting that vertical structure. Because, like you said, you would get overtopping, and that's something we'd like to avoid along the building here as well.
So would the rock revetment in front of the interpretive center, would that be visible?
No,
So
it would be,
it'll
exactly,
be all covered by sand?
exactly. These are all just protections in the future if we were to have higher lake levels and severe erosion. And
Unless the sand is eroded,
But
That's
it could be,
correct.
that could become visible.
then the rock
but-
would be
Yes.
visible.
Okay,
It
but-
would be better to see a sloped rock revetment potentially than a cliff drop off of.
Of the,
Boardwalk.
with the steel revetment, steel,
Correct.
okay, I got it. Okay, I'm fine with that.
Any other questions? All right, then I'm going to move on to the middle cove, to the swimming cove. So the priorities here obviously are swimming and recreation on the actual cove, on the sand. There's also, this is where our concession stand and restrooms are located, the guardhouse as well. So what's at risk for severe erosion here? First off would be the use of the beach and, kind of one of the primary purposes of Rosewood Beach. In addition, we do have the buildings back here that we'd certainly want to protect. These buildings are set further back, and even when we were having the severe erosion last year, the lake was not reaching near as close to those buildings it was in the interpretive cove. So with that said, as staff were exploring this, staff felt that it was most appropriate to consider an option in this cove that would have the added benefit of helping to additionally retain some of the sand. And I had mentioned earlier with the underwater weir, it's one that we feel is not really ideal for a swimming area for a number of reasons, one even being a safety concern with the rock right there. So the one that was further discussed was the reduced gap. And you see that here. The idea would be to extend these stone sections in further. Exactly what that would look like is still to be determined. That would be that next phase. If we chose to further explore this, would be to move forward with construction documents. Would also involve some computer modeling where it would be determined exactly how much of a gap you would reduce there. Any questions in regards to this one?
Yes. If you wanted to do a stone revetment instead of narrowing the cove, what would you do at this cove?
So you have the guardhouse here.
Which is pretty set back pretty far.
Exactly. So the focus on the stone revetment would be along the structure, right here. And we do have, you'll see in the next slide here, we do have an estimated cost for that as well, if that was a standalone project. And then
And
this
is that 270 feet, is that the entire boardwalk, or is that just in front of the two structures?
I'd have to double check that. Actually, I think that was probably a larger length than, since the last presentation, like I said, we've continued to work a little bit and refine some of this. And once again, if the board had chose to install a revetment in the back of the beach here, it's something that would protect those buildings, but it's not something that would do anything to retain the sand if we continue to have similar lake levels.
But if we continually have high lake levels, would the erosion occur in the middle of the cove and not so much on the side? So we would still have sand on the sides as it angles out into the beach, angles out into the lake. But it just really would be the center area where you would see the significant erosion if the high lake levels continue. Is that correct?
I would agree with that. This is something that we would move forward with, like I said, with the modeling, where the Smith Group would look closer at exactly how to make this work to benefit the cove.
So regardless, even if we didn't do that, there would still be areas available for beach access to the lake on the sides. Even in worst case scenario, if the lake levels went all the way up and the erosion all the way up to the buildings, you still have being able to access the water from the sides, because there would be less erosion along the side.
Well, if you would think about
Yeah.
what it looked like before we brought
Yeah.
that sand in, there was some along the sides.
Got it.
Certainly the other option, which I'm not articulating here, but it's understood, is to not do anything in this cove and see how time progresses. The one thing I want just to stress, and especially with the revetments, is if we move forward with refining that and getting it to a point that we'd be ready to bid it out, it just puts us in an ideal position where if we found that we need to move forward with it, we could bid it out in a couple months, have it going, or have it already permitted.
Got it.
So for something like this as well, if this was a route that the board chose to go with, if we did some of the engineering now, it would just make it go a little quicker down the road. But I will say, we're still exploring it, but it's unlikely that we would be able to complete the engineering and, more importantly, complete the permitting process to get this done anytime this year. This would still be a future.
Okay, so we talked about protecting the buildings. Let's talk about the boardwalk.
Mhm.
Does the boardwalk, is there any area of the boardwalk that may need protecting, based on, the construction, the footings and everything? Is there anything that needs to be protected at the boardwalk?
At this cove, this time we don't feel so. Worst case scenario, maybe some boards get lost or something like that, and those can always be replaced. So once again, this is a balance of cost, putting the
But-
revetment or some kind of control.
But in answer to that question, if we did the revetment, the buildings take up maybe half of the boardwalk. The boardwalk is is to the lakeside,
Yeah.
so that's going to be where the protection
Yeah,
is
it would be
going.
in front of it. So if you did a stone revetment in front of the buildings, in front of the boardwalk, would it be similar to the stone revetment that we just talked about at the interpretive center, which would, assuming the sand does not erode, it will be underground and be invisible?
Yep, that's correct.
And the only way it would become visible if there was significant erosion and the sand disappeared.
That's correct.
Got it.
And when you talked about and the engineering, you're talking about they would have to create models based on variables of how narrow the gap needed to be, and that would inform us. Okay. And following up on Cal's, the 270 feet, it would be interesting to learn what a model would be for putting the revetment just in front of those, because in my mind, that's not 270 feet. The food.
Yeah, no, it's
Right.
I'd have to double check,
Yeah.
but it's likely that was a larger expanse.
Is there any danger to the bluff in this
We don't
area?
feel so, no. This is actually something we've had quite a bit of discussions about.
So the bluff is set back significantly far enough that there's no danger of the bluff being compromised by the wave action or the high lake levels, regardless of what we do down there?
That's
That's what Margaret said, and she also felt that with the significant amount of vegetation on the bluff, it also acts as
Stabilizes.
it wouldn't erode.
Has that bluff been investigated for stabilization, to see how stable it is? Because I know that when we did Rosewood, Rebecca spent a lot of time revegetating that bluff to create a more stable situation. I know that with all the heavy rains that we've had over the last couple of years, there's been some bluff failures all throughout Highland Park. If we haven't looked at that bluff to check how stable it is, obviously we have a big investment at the bottom with these structures. We want to make sure that it's, that we're at least monitoring the stability of the bluff.
Any other questions with this cove? And then I'm going to move on now to the final cove, to the recreation cove. So the primary purpose of this was obviously in the name, was recreation. It was the sand volleyball here. It's also the closest to the playground. And then there's access from the upper park down here. And it also served as an overflow cell for swimming. This cove was not part of the sand nourishment project that we did last fall. It did not meet the status of the emergency status. As you can see, there's not a building there. There wasn't any larger infrastructure that was, we had major concerns about. Obviously, we do have impacts to the playground here, you'll see. So for this one, I want to just show a few more pictures. I will say that in continued discussions with Smith Group, they feel at this time that the underwater weir and the reduced gap may not be the best approach for this cove. It's a little unique. We've seen some significant sand loss in this cove. And so we're working with them to look at maybe another option for offshore structures there potentially. So this is just a view standing right with the stairs up to my side. You can see here there's the chaise lounge here. A little bit of snow cover. This was taken just a couple days ago, but you can see there is not a lot of beach here. And it's a little hard to see in this photo, but there are a large number of rocks. They're all in this area that looks like they were under the sand here. Now, I do know that there was a stone revetment along this area when there used to be a different beach house here. And I'm not unfortunately certain about the construction here, but it's possible that some of those were some of the rocks that remained from there. You can also see there was a significant amount of geotextile fabric that's becoming exposed as well. So this, while it's an area you can walk through, it's a pretty rough area. This is just looking back at the bluff, and you can see here's a little bit of a boardwalk area and the chaise, and we're experiencing somewhat similar to what we had in the interpretive cove where the sand used to be up to this level and now it's starting to wash out a little bit. Oh yeah, and then, so there's two playground structures. There is the tot lot and then the 5 to 12-year-old lot right here. I want to point out right here, I'm going to show you another picture. This aerial photo was taken shortly after the large storm we had in January. And at that point, we saw a significant movement of the shoreline. It was about here, and then it moved back. And so now we have this large footing that's supporting the shade structure of that playground that is exposed. I'm going to go back to this picture right here. So I will say, for this cove, in discussions with staff and Smith Group, one option would be to bring in additional sand. You can see that it would provide protections for the playground. It would also provide protections in this area where there's all the exposed rock. Exactly how much sand would be suggested, it's hard to say at this point. We would have to look at that further. But it would say that it would be a significant cost. Understanding the project we had previously and the mobilization cost, and working with Smith Group, we'd say it'd probably a minimum of $150,000, if not more. Now, we're bringing this up as something just to think about because the other option is likely to fence off this cove and this portion of this playground because there are safety concerns in this area. Now, it's also likely that we would have to remove this shade structure before it potentially collapsed. So with that said, I wanted to open this up for questions in the discussion.
What would happen across the board on all of these coves if the lake levels went down. For example, this cove, use this as an example. The footing on that shade structure is now exposed. If the lake levels went down, like, if, you know, history tells us they will, what happens to the exposed footing and to the sand that is eroded? What happens to this area if the lake levels go down?
If the lake levels went down, it's likely that staff would feel the most appropriate thing would be to re-nourish this cove.
Just put new sand in.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some sand will come in, but
Yeah.
you're not, the sand's not gonna come back and fill in around
Yeah.
that footing and bring it up. So, if the lake levels drop significantly, it would give us confidence there's not gonna be maybe significant erosions. We're seeing from some of this. And so that would be a likely approach.
So would you move sand currently on site around, or would you have to bring new sand in?
We would most likely need to bring additional material in. And we do, and to remind the board, we do currently have a permit that goes for 10 years that allows us to bring in sand.
And so the Chase lounges, where you go back to that picture
Sure.
on this cove, so it's unlikely that under any scenario that that area will be replenished naturally, so that area is not exposed?
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
So those, you would have to re-nourish, or in the alternative, move sand around to cover those gaps?
And
Now,
you-
the concern now with the lake levels is if we were to bring material in, the material is going to some degree move around, and to some degree, some of it would be lost if the lake levels continue to rise. But obviously, we do have a couple of concerns in this area.
Okay, let's just talk two scenarios. Scenario one is that history tells us the lake levels that we're peaking now, and they're going to go down. So under that scenario, we're just talking. Let's break down each of the different codes. The interpretive code, we should do the work regardless, because that protects the parking lot and the interpretive center. The middle cove, which is the swimming cove, if the lake levels go down, more sand will be exposed. The beaches will be larger. We may need to move some sand around, and then with the recreational cove, where the beach volleyball used to be, we probably will have to re-nourish regardless, because we've lost sand, and we need to push the sand, basically regrade it so that that area is not exposed. Is that a good summary?
I would agree.
Okay, so let's talk about scenario number two, is if lake levels continue to rise and the historical norms don't apply. Under that scenario, the interpretive center, under putting revetments at the interpretive center, we should be protecting the interpretive center and the beach, and the parking lot. So we'd be obtaining our goal even with the higher lake levels with the interpretive center, with the interpretive code. The middle cove, which is the swimming cove, under the high lake levels, we potentially can lose more beach, correct?
Yeah.
And without doing anything to protect the structures or the boardwalk, we have risk with regard to potential damage there. And if we put the revetments in, it protects the building or maybe protects the boardwalk, depending on how much we want to do.
And I think I'd add to that,
Yeah.
even if we had the revetment, if we don't have the beach, it would be very difficult to guard, because it would be very hard for the guards to access their guard
I get it,
stations.
I get
So swimming would be a challenge.
Yeah, but you would have, but the structures would be protected
Structure
by
would
the
be
stone revetment, even though they may become exposed because the sand is eroded, like we talked about. So then there's an operational issue with regard to guarding the beach, because if there's less sand in the middle, it creates an issue for the guards to reach both sides of that cove. Got it.
I think it would
All right, so in the
potentially be a-
third cove, I'm trying to summarize, in more simplistic terms, because my sixth grade education. My,
You went that far?
Yeah, exactly. The recreational cove, it's basically, we figure something out offshore, or in the alternative, we potentially, if the lake levels if they go down, we have to replenish. If the lake levels continue to rise without some type of further offshore protection, we may have to close that cove.
Yes, and to add what Brian said, is one concern is about, it wouldn't be safe for people to swim there, and there's basically no way we could guard that. There's simply not even a spot to put the chair.
So we'd have to close the cove.
Yeah, we would put a temporary fence all the way around, and nobody would be able to access that cove.
And that's if lake levels continue to rise beyond their historical norms.
If we didn't replenish the spring, we would close it regardless, because it's not operable right now.
So right now, so if we don't replenish the spring,
Yeah.
that you're recommending that we don't even operate that third cove?
Correct.
But it's
would
in our,
remove-
but it's in our plan to replenish this spring.
Well, it's in our budget
That's what I meant.
to
Yes.
replenish, but there's been no board approval to.
And when you're talking about replenish, I don't think we've discussed that. Which type of sand you talking about, the torpedo or the bird's eye? Oh, I still remember.
Yeah, so this is obviously something we haven't
discussed.
discussed. But yes, it would, I would assume it would most likely be either a combination or just the bird's eye.
So what timetable do we have to make decisions? When are you looking for us to make decisions?
Want to take that one?
Yeah, I think if we had consensus to move forward, let's speak in coves, I guess I'll go backwards. The third cove with the sand replenishment, that's the only thing we would need to do in the spring if we wanted to open this summer, that part of the cove. We would have to go back to Margaret with Smith Group immediately and have her start engineering those plans so that we could do an approval, possibly even at the February board meeting.
Well, we would then bid that out.
So basically, this is 3 different plans. Each cove has its own separate plan. And so tonight, I guess the pressing need is to make a decision how to handle the recreational cove. Is that what you're asking us to do tonight?
Well, we would like consensus to have Smith Group move forward with at least working on working on the design documents so that we have those when we want to pull the trigger, correct?
We do for separate codes for this.
Let's break this down into coves.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because we're doing 3 separate plans.
Right.
So with regard to the recreational cove, what are you looking for from the board?
We're looking for consensus to move forward with design plans for sand replenishment.
Yeah, my concern for that,
I'd rather start with the easy one.
No, I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing.
No, I know. I'd rather start with the easy one, and let's start with the interpretive cove.
Well, I know, but I see.
I'm gonna go the other way.
I know, but the reason I'm doing it this way is because this one's, I guess, is more pressing, because we have to make a decision. Sounds like in the next 30 days or shorter.
I
with
realize
regard
that, but I think we might have consensus on the interpretive cove. That's
Okay.
why I wanted to ask that first.
You're presiding, so you have the gavel, so you can shut me up anytime you want. Okay.
Yeah, so I think we have, don't we have a consensus?
Would be for the first time, okay?
I would say that the revetment at the interpretive cove would be the smart way to go.
Cal?
I think staff recommendation is right on. I think we need to protect the structures there on the interpretive code.
So what would happen next is we would go to Smith Group to get a proposal to move forward with that process. We don't have a dollar amount at this time, but from our calculations, looking at the percentage of the potential cost, I will say that we would anticipate that cost would certainly be in the double digits, and it could be upwards of $30,000. But we don't know at this time. So what we would then do is go to Smith Group for a proposal. We would return at the next board meeting.
Because with regard to the interpretive code, regardless if there's high lake level or low lake levels, I think that the structures as engineered just hasn't performed the way we thought they were, and I think we need to.
The offshore structures.
Yeah, the offshore structure have not performed the way they were sold to us, and I think what we need to do is protect our investment.
Absolutely. I think that's the consensus.
And then what we would do at that point is we could proceed with the construction documents. Then we have more time to make a decision whether we continue to monitor the situation down there, and if we chose to move forward this year. There would be a point we'd have to make that decision. But at this point, we'd be committing to at least just having that ready to go for the future.
So with the lake levels, I think we had an all-time high, I think, this year for January. So depending on how the lake levels go this year, it may accelerate what we want to do down there. We'll just see what kind of spring we have.
Right.
But I believe the interpretive cove work is totally going to be done this fall.
It could be.
It could be.
Could be, I'm
So,
sorry.
so that would be a decision that the board would make at a later date.
Okay,
Okay.
got it.
You're not
That's-
looking for, you're just, consensus tonight regarding interpretive center, you just want to, we want to move forward with at least this drawing so we
Right.
can pull the trigger when we want to.
Correct.
And, but that's it you're asking for us tonight.
So then staff would return, most likely the next meeting, to approve a contract with Smith Group for
Got
that
it.
work.
Probably with the intention of doing that work in the fall before the,
That would certainly be the
Storms
goal
hit.
of our timeline with them, but understanding that we could have the
We
point
have
where we can make a
options.
decision.
And
Okay.
we don't have funds budgeted for that, so we'd have to figure that out too, right?
We do have some funds.
But not the funds necessary to do it.
Well, but based on the estimated cost here, no, we don't have the full amount.
So I assume somewhere along the line, we're going to have to amend the budget to
Mm-hmm.
reflect this project.
Depending on how the costs come out
Yeah.
and what else we decide to do or don't do,
Got
we
it.
may have to amend the budget.
Okay,
okay.
got it.
See, that was an easy one, that's why I wanted to do that.
Doing a fabulous job.
Now we can do the volleyball cove.
So my concern with the volleyball cove is any vote for a sand replenishment is up to the whimsy of Mother Nature, and so I have a real concern with investing. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but
$150,000, $200,000.
okay, and with almost certainty revisiting, because even though we haven't gotten over the hump yet. According to Smith Group, we still have 2 more years, which potential rising water levels. And so those 2 years, that gap, and that's only if it sticks to historical norms, is what concerns me, because I feel like we'll be coming back after the 150 for another something before we open it up. That's where my concern lies.
I mean, I would just add, and I agree with you, Terry, but I would add is that, the optics of we have a 5-year-old or 6-year-old beach that now has to be closed because, talk about this specific cove, because of the erosion occurring based on the high lake levels. I mean, the optics are not great. However, you put this in context, what is what's happening all the way up and down the shoreline, and the city of Chicago was closing paths and other structures, and beaches are being closed. In Chicago, I know the Chicago Park District is closing beaches, and I know Evanston and Wilmette. So this is not done. This is just not a problem that is happening in Highland Park, and all of a sudden Mother Nature's taking out in Highland Park for some reason. It's actually impacting all the recreational facilities up and down the lake, Chicago, all the way up north. So I think when you message this, if we decide not to go ahead and replenish and see what happens over the next year, is it has to be done in the context that this is not a Highland Park problem. This is a problem that everybody who shares lakefront access in this area is dealing with.
Okay, Jeff, on the volleyball cove, is there any risk to the access from the upper parking lot because of the high lake level?
This
If
is
we do
something
nothing.
This is something that we've discussed quite a bit and explored with Smith Group.
Okay, could you go back to the picture that shows that? This is why we have to be a little bit slow in making this
Yeah,
decision.
so I have to point out for everyone, here is the parking lot in the upper park. Stairway winds this way, it winds down here, comes out right here. And this is where the boardwalk starts. There is a bench here, and then it comes out a little bit with the chase right there.
And by doing nothing, by not replenishing or providing some barriers, high lake levels could put that at risk.
And the stairs we just replaced, right?
I don't think she felt there was a risk for the stairs to be eroded, if that's what you're.
No, I'm talking about access to the stairs.
Because the
boardwalk.
water would be above it, you
At the
mean?
we've got the boardwalk that takes you from the stairs to the beach. And that's a well-used path for walkers and for the people who park up there.
Is there
So
anything
doing
temporary?
nothing,
Yeah, is there anything temporary that can act as to break it?
Well, there's another access point through the ravine. From the backside, there's another path that goes down to the
No,
parking lot.
no.
I take it all the time.
it's not legal.
It's not legal.
Oh, you mean that hill, like
Yeah.
past the park? Oh,
No, that's not an approved access way.
Oh, it isn't?
stop doing that.
Oops.
No, he's referring, the
back
path
path?
that follows the.
Oh, going around the other way. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I thought you were doing what they do at other places, where you're just cutting down
No,
slope.
no. I would
Okay.
never do anything that is not completely proper.
Well,
What are you laughing for?
so I guess the question is, should we consider, and this is what needs to be reviewed by Margaret, the replenishment to assure that the path isn't affected?
This, once again, this was the exact question that we posed, and it was her opinion that it was not at risk.
Okay.
And one of the discussions that staff had was the point that was brought up when the lake waters, if and when they go back down, we're gonna have to replenish at some point. So the question is, do we wanna wait and see how 2020 goes? And just keep waiting till it goes down to replenish, or do we wanna replenish now? But the risk to that is, you're gonna have to replenish again, potentially, if we lose a significant amount of that.
I think Barney brings up a good point. I think you have to figure out operationally, I mean, a lot of our parking's upstairs.
Right.
And so we need to be able to have access to that parking lot in order for people to easily enjoy the rest of the beach. So
Right.
regardless of what happens there, I mean, that's, you guys call because you do operations.
I'm also concerned about the play area.
Can that be
We haven't
moved
talked about
at
that.
all?
Let's just talk, let's finish.
Well, it's part of the
Yeah.
rec cove. It's part of the volleyball cove, and
Yeah, so
it's at risk.
with this, if we were to not replenish the sand, the plan would be, we would remove the shade structure, and then that playground for the older age group would be closed off. So there would only be the tot playground, because all of that would be at risk if we were not to replenish.
And when we say remove, we're talking remove, and this would be removing at a cost. It's not just removing the fabric.
Right.
Why does it have to be removed? If it's blocked off, and because I guess we talked about that, if you replenish the area, then you would replenish the sand around the players, so why would we have to remove it?
Well, if we were not to replenish, there's concern that the wall failure,
I'm sorry?
concern of failure of.
Right, and then it could
Would we
topple.
collapse?
Yeah.
Really?
So that was the point of, maybe we don't replenish, but this area is at risk by not replenishing. Now, we could probably work around that, replenishing this area, I would assume, but
We have to mobilize, I don't know what that would cost.
Yeah, it's
it
significant.
doesn't make any sense.
And
Yeah.
if you, I mean, I'll be totally honest.
Well, where's the tot one?
If
Right
you look
next
here,
to
the
it?
Yeah.
sand comes
Oh.
in from down here. You're bringing it down, so it's
Sorry?
the mobilization is a minimal cost. I mean, is a base cost. It's somewhat significant.
It's significant, or-
Yeah. So if we were going to bring in sand, it wouldn't be just a small area,
yeah.
unless we were able to do that on our own somehow.
Go to Home Depot and get some
It's a
sand.
bunch of bags, and we'll just dump them all.
So they're next to each other, but that's significant in the ways of which one would get damaged and which one wouldn't be touched?
Yeah.
Makes that big a difference?
When
So
you're
we
out
know the
there, you
tot
can
one's
see it's
safe?
much- We feel that it does.
So when do you need a decision on this, Cove?
Well, like Brian said, if the decision would be made to nourish this cove, the assumption would be that we would want to have that done before summer. I mean, obviously we would. And so at that point, we would need to work with Smith Group on quantities and some design. But more importantly, we would need a lead time to get that out, so.
And by not replenishing, we are taking away a significant amenity, because a lot of people use that for its purpose.
And we budgeted money to replenish the sand here?
So again, there's funds in the budget for 2020 and 2021. They're not exactly identified for this specific purpose, but there is 300 and how much in
350.
in sand replenishment. So there are funds available to.
Could we use the thicker grade of sand? I keep forgetting which one's which.
The birds are.
Bird's eye.
The bird's eye in this cove,
I
is
think we-
is that more expensive?
No, it's not.
Okay, then
Not
I would
enough.
totally recommend that wouldn't shift as much.
I mean, I would think the bird's eye sand did what it was advertised to do. I mean, the heavier sand did protect, and the January storm and the storm before that, after we put it in, I mean, it did serve its purpose.
But this would be exclusively the sand. We wouldn't even border the water.
With
That-
birds.
That's what we did in the interpretive code.
Yeah, we would treat this similar to the interpretive code. All right, let's go to the other cove, the swimming cove.
Well, I would be really interested in finding out what the adjusted cost would be. I mean, I guess we could probably figure it out from per square foot, but it says 270 feet for 513, right? I'm looking at that.
And that would be, my understanding is that would be a standalone project. Let's say, I'm going to give it an example where the board chose to go in the direction of installing revetment both in the interpretive cove and the swimming cove as part of the same project. You're going to reduce, like say, some of your cost in mobilization. So this would be looking at it as a standalone project.
And I believe the the recommendation, was it for the steel revetment or was it the stone?
So,
The stone, but it would, once again, it would have to be sized and looked at further, and so these numbers would certainly be adjusted.
so you're not looking to, if we decide to push forward with the stone revetment in the swimming cove, you're not looking to do that in the second quarter of this year? This would be like a third or fourth quarter?
Well, I bring up that, you mean,
You would do it at the same time you would do the interpretive
you
center?
certainly could, there would be
Saving
a
costs.
savings there.
There'd be an economy of scale, and I mean, if you save some costs.
Certainly.
So part of the discussion with this cove, we looked at the cost-benefit analysis. So the cost of the revetment certainly protects the structures, but we felt like the structures are at much less risk than they are, say, in the interpretive center cove. And if we put in the revetment, we're protecting structures that are at lower risk, and we're also losing the benefit of having the sand in the beach and using it for its intended purpose. Because the stone revetment, if the water comes up that high, it's going to be exposed, and we're not going to have the sand there. It'll be the exposed revetment.
I'm confused.
So,
I think they're recommending.
So basically what Brian's saying, if you keep in mind in this code, so once again, the buildings aren't quite as at risk, but if the stone revetment has to do its job,
right.
at that point, we have no beach, there's no swimming cove there.
But if we don't have the stone revetment and it comes into play, then we don't have buildings, because the water is going to go all the way up to the
That's what we're
buildings.
saying. We don't believe if we did, the theory is if you invest in the reduced gap, the water won't come up that high. And it's not going to come up that high necessarily at this point. I don't think,
Were you saying the stone revetment, even though it's underground, would reduce the size of the beach? Is that what you're saying?
well, yes.
No, we got confused here.
I'm really confused.
Oh, I think that's what he did say.
Yeah.
It's not the stone revetment itself that's going to reduce the size of the beach.
Well, if the water gets that high, the water itself will reduce the size of the beach,
Right.
and the stone revetment will be exposed.
Got it.
So
And
the-
if we don't put the stone revetment and the water gets that high, then the buildings are exposed.
If we don't do the reduced gap.
Yes.
I thought we said we're going to do steel for that. Isn't that recommended?
No, not for this one.
We're
That's,
talking about the
In-
interpretive?
yeah. No, we're talking about the swimming beach.
The middle
Steel
one.
was for
Yeah.
interpretive cove?
The steel is for the parking
The
lot,
parking lot.
the sheet pile for the
Okay.
parking lot.
But the reduced gap has its own negatives that were
So
outlined.
I think what Brian's saying is if it was decided that we wanted to do something to address erosion in this cove, that it may make the most sense to continue to explore the offshore structure, because it does have the added benefit of retaining sand, and it's our understanding that those buildings are not at as much risk as the buildings in the interpretive code.
So I guess what you're asking us is what we should be focusing on. Should we be focusing on trying to retain sand in this cove, or just protect the buildings and not worry about retaining sand?
And these buildings don't have the same value either as the interpretive.
Correct, and they're not glass walls facing the lake, they're actually stone walls. So the bigger concern would be more if the
The boardwalk.
the boardwalk or
Foundation.
the foundation was at risk.
Right.
The buildings themselves wouldn't be at risk, and there's not as,
Is there such a thing as a, not an underwater weir, but over water.
There's something called a
Funny.
bob, there's a
You're
bob
repeating our
wheel.
conversations.
Funny
with
that you
Anybody know
mention
Bob
that. Yeah, like something that is beyond the gap,
Yeah.
that's higher up, that,
We asked this very question.
yeah, so does that exist?
It was, short answer was it wasn't recommended.
So first of all, you can't, if you go outside of our current breakwaters, you go into space that would be much more difficult to permit because it's not really our contained space that we already have for our coves.
Right.
So it would be very difficult and very expensive because you're almost paying for the underwater weir and the rock on top of it. Adding on to the current breakwater structures is really the most cost-effective way because you already have the stone structure there and you're just adding to it. So, again, there were a lot of benefits that staff saw to doing the reduced gap from the standpoint of you receive the benefit of potentially retaining the sand and protecting the structures, whereas the revetment just protects the
You're
structures.
kind of conceding at that point, right? If
Oh,
you
if
put
you
the
do the
revetments,
revetment, yeah.
yeah,
Which
you're just
in the-
going like, this is gonna happen, so let's protect our
Which in the
value.
interpretive cove, we're fine
sense,
with
yeah.
because the value is in the buildings and the parking lot and the structure. That's what that beach, that's what that cove, that area is intended to do and serve. That's the most important thing. In this cove, if we don't have a swimming beach, it's gonna have a significant effect
Do,
on the purpose.
do we have a picture that shows the current water level in the swimming cove? How high the water is coming up in the swimming cove?
So this picture was taken 3 weeks ago, but it's obviously on a really calm day.
Well, Margaret said that she was 80%, and I'm quoting her, she was 80% confident that by putting the bird's eye sand in, that it was going to accomplish its goal of retaining sand and also protecting the boardwalk and the structure.
And I think she stands by that so long as, for example, the worst-case scenario doesn't happen. I mean, right now, they're still predicting record-high lake levels through June, but with a very, very wet spring, that could be even worse. And it'll last another year, another 2 years.
If conditions continue to, water level continues to rise,
Eventually, this will
you're
be
you're
lost.
gonna see more erosion.
And we'll have to replenish sand again.
And guys, keep in mind, and ladies, keep in mind, it's not just the additional 5 inches of lake level, it's the effect of the storms surging it in. I mean, if the water goes up 5 inches, yes, there's gonna be a smaller beach, just in a still day. It's the storms that surge in and take away the sand. There's more water being forced in.
So is this, the building in the middle, is that the concession area? And the locker rooms to the left?
This is the concession and these are the restaurants.
Okay. I don't think we have to make a decision tonight on this cove, but
Well, what we can certainly do is go back to Smith Group and get a proposal from them on moving forward with the engineering for this to be able to at least educate the board on what that cost would look like.
how much did that cost?
Well, to ask for it won't cost anything.
Oh, okay.
I think that's the wisest.
Yeah.
this
So
point.
can you summarize what we just did?
So at this time, what we'll do is we will go back to Smith Group and we will ask for a proposal for the interpretive cove to move to, into construction documents. With the, at this point, with the goal of asking the board to approve that at the next meeting. We'll also talk to them further about the cost of moving forward with engineering of the swimming cove with the reduced gap. And we will share that information with the board.
Could we also, with the swimming cove, is it make any sense to just protect the buildings
That's where I'm leaning, by the way.
and not the other 150 feet or whatever?
That's gonna, I mean, that's, I guess that's the feedback. We're basically sharing the different options with the board. That's the guidance we're looking for. is
I
to-
mean, with regard to the swimming cove, I'm leaning towards protecting the buildings and let the sand be the sand. We don't just see what happens. I mean, it's, reducing the gap. I mean, we've already been sold one bill of goods that this is going to be that this engineering was going to protect the beach. I'm not confident that that any type of structures in the lake is going to do more than what is existing there. And I think that we need to protect our investment up and down, and doing everything on shore, because I know that when the original project was engineered, they went up to the Quebec City and they built a model, and they did all, it was a very expensive project. I didn't go on that trip, but some people staff went up there and they actually saw the model that they did. And I think this is much more of a complicated alternative by closing the gap, because I don't know how that's going to impact everything else in the area. I think that needs to be looked at. So I'm really leery of doing anything in the water. And
Plus, the aesthetics will be dramatically different.
yeah, I mean, I'm listen, if the lake levels continue to rise, that's what it is. I mean, and we just do the best on. Again, we're not the only community that's dealing with this issue. I mean, the outer drive may close. You never know if the lake levels continue to rise. So, I mean, we're not the only community dealing with issues, and these are small issues when you think in the big picture what other communities are dealing with. So, I'm more concerned right now about I guess the immediate concern is the playground area, because that one seems to be at risk, and we have to figure out what to do there.
With the thought that we should struggle to preserve it because it's such a valuable component of the beach.
And that includes, that would require replenishing that area, or replenishing that cove. I think that's something we have to look at.
I agree. Lori?
What do you think, Terry? You gave me a face.
No, that was a stretch.
Oh.
I'm concerned, like I said,
Yeah.
I'm concerned about spending and then spending again.
Yeah. There's no right answer.
Yeah.
Well, before Lori, I think we always have replenishment of sand in the budget, don't we? In a normal year, we have something?
We did for the past 5 years as a placeholder, right, in case.
But not for, it was for something.
Not to this
Yeah.
But not of this magnitude.
Yeah.
Not for
Certainly
this
not, no,
purpose.
but it wasn't for this purpose.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry, Lori?
Didn't we get some kind of emergency funding, or that was just permission to do it?
So we've applied.
Oh, when did we find out
for-
about it?
We completed a pre-application. We would find out if we were asked to, this was through IEMA and then FEMA, for a full application. It wouldn't be till sometime in March. So if this funding was an opportunity, it wouldn't allow us to, and for this application, it was revetment along the back of those two coves we've been discussing. It would pay 75% of that work. However, the funding most likely wouldn't be available till sometime next year.
Oh, okay.
So we certainly throw our hat in the ring for that. It doesn't hurt, understanding there could be a point where we'd have to move forward anyway, just to protect things, but it's in our back pocket as a potential.
Jeff, solar panel?
Sure.
All right. So I'll try to keep this presentation briefer. I will start by saying, at our February 4th Finance Committee, I presented on solar panels and gave the committee an update on the progress and made a recommendation. So I will be sharing that same recommendation here. And that is, as the board is aware, for some time now, staff have been exploring having solar panels installed Park District facility. We have looked at purchasing panels. We've looked at the lease option. We've spoken to several companies. We've also reached out to other districts, including the Park District of Oak Park, that has several successful solar panel projects, both lease and ones that they own themselves. And one of the facilities that we started looking at was, this is the Deer Creek Racquet Club. So one option was to work with a company that would provide a lease for the panels. And so this was a proposal from that company. If they were to come in and provide panels, it would not be at cost to the district. Their goal is covering approximately 20 to 30% of the energy usage in the building. And the additional energy that the building would use, we would purchase directly from that company. So this company is EcoSolar, who works with an energy provider called Realgy. And so we would purchase the additional energy from Realgy. So as part of the process, we would negotiate a contract and a rate, which would be at or lower than the current rate we have right now. And this is something we have spoken to our legal counsel about because we would be entering into longer-term energy contracts and making certain this is something we can do. And this is something that the Park District of Oak Park does for one of their larger facilities. With the lease option, you need a facility that produces significant amount, or has a significant amount of energy usage, I should say. So based on their requirements, we were able to consider 3 facilities: Centennial Ice Arena, the Recreation Center of Highland Park, and Deer Creek Racquet Club. And one of the factors, obviously, is the roof. You would not want to put solar panels on a building that has a roof that's going to be replaced in a few years. The Deer Creek Racquet Club roof is actually up for replacement later this year. It's 2024 is our expected replacement for the roofs on the other 2 facilities that I mentioned. So at this time, this year, this would be the only facility that really makes the most sense. The lease option is certainly something that's attractive. It is a situation where all costs are covered by Realgy and EcoSolar, including maintenance, if a panel were to be broken, anything like that's covered by them. This is something we've learned quite a bit about, but there is some navigating to this. If we were to purchase the panels ourselves, we'd also be responsible for the maintenance. Our understanding is that it is low maintenance, but going the lease route would give us an opportunity to, for lack of a better term, to test it out. And for the purchase option, you do realize some benefits in what are called renewable energy credits, where essentially over a period of years, we would receive dollars back that would pay for a portion of the system. We spoke to another company about purchase, and we looked at this exact system right here, and their estimate was that we would probably see a payoff within about 4 or 5 years. That includes the renewable energy credits and other credits. But one thing to keep in mind that we've been understanding, and we've talked to many other people who have panels, is that it's all based on assumptions. And if you have a period of winter where there's snow on the panels, they're not producing anything. So you estimate what it's going to produce, but it's obviously never a certainty. In regards to the purchase option, this is not something that was budgeted in the capital budget for this year either. It would be estimated a system like this would probably be around $165,000. In addition, we would need to hire a structural engineer to assess the building to simply make certain that it could withstand the load. And then we would also hire an engineer, which would probably be a few $1,000s. And then for probably about $10,000, we'd have to hire an engineer to design the system, and then we would bid it out. Under the lease approach, all of those costs are covered. So with that said, staff would recommend that we continue to pursue the lease option for Deer Creek Racquet Club. There have been preliminary assessments by EcoSolar for this facility. The next step is for the Park District to provide EcoSolar with what they're calling a letter of intent. It's a non-binding, but it does show our intention of moving forward with this. And then at that point, they would do more detailed analysis and determine whether or not this is truly a viable facility for them. And then from there, if we pass that step, then we would start to negotiate a contract with them. So there is one cost would be obviously working with legal counsel to negotiate the contract, but that's the only cost we would see with going this route. So at this point, staff are recommending consensus from requesting consensus from the board to provide a letter of intent, and once again, a non-binding letter of intent to EcoSolar to move forward with exploring panels at this facility.
Do we have any questions for Jeff?
So are you saying, Jeff, that we would replace the roof a year earlier?
No, the roof is actually scheduled to be replaced this late summer, early fall.
Oh, right now? Oh, I think it's kind of perfect that we only have one facility that's kind of eligible to give it a try before we start investing, and so I'm fine with it.
Terry?
And actually, this I wanted to address Cal with this. You raised several questions when we heard the initial about the middleman aspect, and do you feel satisfied, or have
Yeah.
you heard, okay.
Yeah, we had a long discussion of this at the Finance Committee. We talked about the own to lease, and we at the consensus at the Finance Committee was to recommend to the board that we pursue the lease option.
Okay, then if he's good with it, then I'm fine with
Cal, anything?
No.
Well, I certainly think that this is the direction we need to go. It goes with our mission statement, clearly goes with our mission statement, and we save some money. All right?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Rec Center of Highland Park, Mitch Carr.
There you go.
Okay. So, here to update the board tonight about the locker room project at the Recreation Center. Our goal tonight is to get a consensus from the board on the concept design that we're going to present. Before going to the actual concept design, I thought I would start with kind of review of what the locker room currently presents, including its footprint. So that is this first drawing here. Even though it says Concept Plan C, this is actually the current layout of the rec center. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the layout. I'm going to talk about some of the project priorities that we identified, some of the amenity priorities that membership helped us identify, and then go through that process of how we got to concept design. So to orientate everybody here, this is the entry, the main entry. This is the long hallway that goes down to the entry of the aquatic area. These are the two family changing rooms that we have, private family changing areas. This is the entry to the women's. This is the entry to the men's. So inside, as far as the elements, if you haven't been in the locker rooms, the carpet it's an old, outdated carpet. It's met its useful life. Our tile work within the shower areas in both locker rooms are outdated. The fixtures are outdated. The lockers themselves, the finishes are outdated, and the locker locks components, we have some challenges with those. They're old mechanicals, so they do tend to break easier and have more failures. The washroom areas, again, for both the women's and men's. So I'm in the women's now. The washroom areas are located way over here. The men's are located way over here. There's actually a door divider. And so just efficiency and flow, there's not a good way, let's say, for example, if you just want to shave or blow dry your hair or something like that after you get out of the shower, you have to go all the way over to these areas. So there's not a really good efficient flow in this locker room. As far as staff priorities, when we talked to the staff, some of the things I just mentioned were identified. Other elements were HVAC, ventilation, temperature controls. Those are challenges within the locker room area. And then family changing space, and I'm talking right now more in the inside the locker area. There's a small little private area here for the women's. There's nothing inside the men's. So if you needed a private changing area, specifically if you had a young child of opposite sex in the changing room, you're really relying only upon these two family changing rooms. So that was a lot of the project priorities that the staff identified, and again, knowing the conditions that we already have. We did ask membership, so if there was one amenity that you could choose, which would be the prioritized enhancement? And the list, the top three were sauna, towel service, and then family or private locker changing area. And it was in that order as far as the priorities go. So with those project priorities, staffed along with Woodhouse Tanucci architects visited several different park district and commercial sites for concept ideas and to review materials. Some of those sites included East Bank Club, Chicago Athletic Club, Glenview Park District, Buffalo Grove Park District, Wheeling Park District. All of those had recently went through a renovation. So it was not only good for us to see conceptual designs and materials, but we got to ask their staff a lot of questions about what are their challenges, how did you try to resolve them. So a lot of that went into the concept as well. So from these visits and the project priorities, we developed some conceptual designs. Those concept designs, the reviewing of those were done in the months of December and January. Staff, along with Park Board liaisons, Vice President Ruttenberg and President Kaplan, reviewed and helped narrow those down. And we narrowed them down to 4 concepts that we actually brought to the Finance Committee for their feedback last week. We reviewed those 4 concepts with the Finance Committee. And after a discussion, tonight we're bringing forth the preferred concept design to share with the whole board. So before I move to the preferred concept design, any questions on what currently is presented or how we got to the concept design phase? No? Okay.
Good.
So I'm going to scroll down and talk through a little bit of the concept design. So again, orientation is entry, long haul into the aquatic area, entry into the locker room area. The family changing areas do not change in this concept. That long hall we talked about does have a little bit of a pain point. It's a little bit of a bottleneck. It's narrow. So in this concept, we looked at trying to open this area up a little bit. Just to improve flow, gives us an opportunity maybe to put some, a TV or something here to help inform people of what's going on in the facility or within the district. This bench area is a quick stop if you're waiting for somebody, but it does open up a little bit better for traffic flow. When we enter into the areas, the one thing that this concept on paper is not going to show, I want to make sure to address that it is going to address some of those elements that I talked about, such as new flooring, new locker fronts, new locks, new tile, new lighting, new fixtures, new HVAC. All of that's incorporated into this design, and when you see the proposed budget, that is incorporated into it. So when you walk into the women's entry or the men's entry, not a lot's going to change immediately, other than, of course, there would be no flooring down. The wet area or the shower areas really do stay the same. The first immediate thing that you would notice from a design standpoint is in both areas, women's and men's, there's going to be vanities to help with that efficiency that we were talking about. Again, the locker room, the bathrooms will still be located where they're at, but if you just need, again, to get ready, and you don't need the bathroom, they're quick access from the showers. So that's one element that's been added. There is a towel vending area, since towel service was listed as an amenity priority. Again, those would be, are located from an efficiency standpoint close to all the wet areas and also close to the entries and exits. Now, what one of those look like, this isn't the exact piece. It may be, potentially, it's an option, but this is kind of like what those look like. This is called the towel tracker. So basically, this would be, it's a vending style service towel. So you would go up and you would swipe a fob, swipe a card that would allow you access, and it would assign those towels to the person or to that card. And then when you return it, same thing. Interact with the machine, return the towels, and it deducts from the fact that you took 2 if you return 2. Okay, and in this area, also going back to those amenities that membership was looking for, were added in saunas. These are 80 square foot saunas. They will accommodate approximately 6 to 8 people. And again, we're keeping them close to the wet area, so they're a little bit removed from the locker area. So there's some definition between locker space and some of the newer amenities in the wet areas. The private changing areas we did address in both women's and men's. In the women's, there are going to be 2 identified spaces here. and 2 identified spaces here. These 2 identified spaces that I'm circling here already have them, so we just would be redesigning them. In the men's, they would be located here and here. And these would be basically stalls that would have doors that would lock. As far as the total layout and design, what this currently allows for is 258 lockers in the men's area, 198 lockers in the women's area. Currently at the rec center, there are 303 in the men's and 240 in the women's. So it does reduce our locker size down. Staff feels comfortable with that, and the numbers that we're giving you here, this 258, for example, in the men's, that's a double stacked locker. So one on top of the other. If we decided to go full length, that just means we're sacrificing 2 for 1. So in this case, in the men's, if we said, well, we want 100 full length, well, now we're down to 158 lockers. So it gives us flexibility to still have a combination, and that we can, decide as we go through additional phases of design. So the other area, we are going to add an element here, which is a doorway, so that the doorway from the women's restroom area is similar to the men's, so that there's a doorway access between the two. Otherwise, inside the bathroom areas where the toilets and the other sinks are located, we wouldn't be touching anything inside of there as part of this project. All the other elements are really inside the locker areas. So before I go on to the budget and financial impacts and timelines, any questions about this concept design that we're presenting?
Lori, Terry, Cal?
Wasn't one of the questions we had, and maybe this addresses it, is access from the other side, from the public? So is that what you were just talking about with doorways? That's what that was referring to.
Yeah, that was, well, so it will mirror what's in the men's. So there will be another doorway here. And right now there is one here. So from the country club side, you have door A.
Where's your arrow?
Right, I'm sorry.
Got it.
So this is the men's entry. Door A and door B. Door B gets you into the locker area. Door A will first just get you into this bathroom area. So we are adding another door because that doesn't currently exist in the women's. There's not a separator door between the locker and the bathroom area. There is one from the country club side.
So, from a safety standpoint, and you guys use the rec center more than I do, but how are you feeling about people that use the community park, coming in, need a bathroom, go to the bathroom here? Kids are changing for camp or whatever. Does this address that, or are we not concerned about that?
So right now, these doorways that are on the country club side are blocked. You can't get in from this side. As far as operations, we have talked with the city. When the city does move seniors here, that'll be an operational decision of how the senior center or senior center elements would access this area. But as of today, if somebody came in from, got in from this side over here where this doorway is, which is also a locked door right now, they wouldn't be able to get into these doors. The other access point is here, this door, and that also is locked. The only way you can access that door is, and the only way right now we allow access is if you are, if you need to utilize the elevators. You stop at the front desk, you check out a swipe badge, and you swipe your badge here, and that opens the door. So there's still elevator or physically disabled access.
So we have the potential in the future, should we want to open up access to restrooms for people that have just come to enjoy the park, there's a potential to work that out? Or would we have to significantly change the structure of the locker rooms to accommodate those people?
Yeah, we would. Right now, we would have to significantly, and we did actually look at some designs that basically said the only way to achieve that fully would be to redesign the whole thing, start from scratch, because you'll always have this door here. So you can have, I mean, we could potentially put a lock there and try to develop some type of access. But the fact that there's no toilets on this side is the barrier. We've reduced the amount of need for patrons to go on this side because we've added vanity elements, but still with toilets, you're going to have to go to this side. So, you know, again, if we closed the door and locked it and said, well, as a member, you could fob to get back in, and work with the senior center, said, well, you can get fobs to get back in, it becomes more of a hindrance, because then you leave and, oh, I forgot my fob, now I'm stuck on this side. So it is an operational challenge still.
Aren't we going to have a bathroom in the community park?
Yes, we did receive grant funding for a restroom, and it's going to be out on the site.
But as of right now, it's greatly reduced on being able to access from this side. The control element is really at the front desk still, so that is the good thing.
Terry, since the golf course closed, there's really no reason to have access to the east from the clubhouse, because that's really not being actively used right now. Right now, anybody using the community park does not have access to these bathrooms. What ends up happening is that once the city designs the clubhouse with regard to whatever use they want, or what they decide to do there, then we'll have to have discussions with the city on how to address the use of these bathrooms, or the construction of separate bathrooms to accommodate whatever need that they have. But we don't know what that is until they design what they want to design there.
Okay. So
Lori?
if you guys feel confident.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I like the towel idea, because when you first said, you know, we were going to accommodate that, I mean, we have trouble with the small towels, people just walking out with them. So does a person pay for it? Is it an additional cost, or do members automatically get it, or how does that work?
Yeah, the design would be that it would be an add-on service that you could pay for as an amenity. And then to control this, that vending service actually helps control your towel loss, because
Right.
if it doesn't get returned, then it's just charged to the person who took it.
So could someone use a credit card for it?
It's something that you would sign up for, like at your front desk, and add on to your membership.
Okay. And then the other question I had is about the sauna. You said it would fit 6 to 8.
Yeah.
I don't know, is that how big or small? I mean, we don't want anything extravagant. I don't know how many people will use it, but is it going to feel like really crowded in there? I mean,
I think that was our best estimate that Andy was able to give us based off of the 80 square foot, is to say, you know, I would say, to be honest with you, it's probably more like 6. I don't, you know, just people knowing their personal space and their comfort when you go into a sauna, you're probably looking at more of the 6 range than you are the 8. But I think theoretically you could accommodate 8.
yeah, I think the sauna idea is so interesting to me, and it seems now after you presented it just so appropriate, because it's an amenity for all ages, where I think like a steam might be too uncomfortable. I feel like sauna's like right in the middle for both. So I'm glad it works, and I like that it's not co-ed, because I initially thought it was. I like that it's a separate space. Good stuff. So what about, you know, gotta ask the timing of this?
Yeah. So let me just touch base here first on the financials. So this is, again, just through concept design. We were given a preliminary project budget. The budget that's in the capital plan right now, and that budget was designed primarily for replacement of the floors and the lockers, was $175,000. We do have $30,000 set aside for HVAC as part of regular replacement. This total project design, given that there was additional discussion with membership and some of the other challenges that we see on an operational basis, so this additional enhancement is a $556,000 project budget with a healthy contingency. We put 20% in there, knowing we're not moving walls, and that's a lot of walls, so that's a good thing, but there's still a lot of additional design elements that may come into play as we do this, so we wanted a healthy contingency. As far as the timeline, so again, today we're looking at conceptual design, a recommendation and consensus from the board. We would then be coming to of design and construction documents from Woodhouse Tanucci at the regular board meeting in February, looking at permitting in March, and just like when we did the renovation at the rec center, it will be a little bit of a painful project for the facility. Right now, if you look at this, you're probably looking at 3 to 4 weeks of major disruption inside the locker area, meaning that we might not have access to any components of the locker area. And if we have the access, it's going to be the non-wet areas. That's the biggest part of this project is, just a lot of some of the plumbing things that are going to have to be done. But we put it conservatively at an 8-week project. We feel that it could be possibly be done in 6 weeks, but we also want to have that buffer in there. So at best, I think we're looking at end of September, but more realistically, it's probably a mid-October where there'll be full disruption or partial disruption to the locker room area.
And this is after camps have been completed. And is this our normal shutdown?
Right, when we
phase?
shut down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Starting in our normal 1-week shutdown.
So we would try to get a lot of that really big demolition stuff done during that first week. And that's usually how things do happen with these projects, is you get a lot of heavy demolition in the beginning, so.
Any other questions?
I'll just add, we had an extensive discussion at the Finance Committee, and we looked at all the different alternatives. And when we settled on this one, we started with, like we do every other project. If money was no object, and what would you like to see there? And then we moved backwards from there. I mean, if money was no object, we, demo the entire area and reconfigure and do that, but that just didn't seem fiscally prudent to do that for a locker room facility at the rec center. So what we did is, and I don't want to say settle, but we came to the conclusion that this was probably the most fiscally responsible way to accomplish what we need to do. The locker rooms are dingy. They need to be, the lockers are dilapidated, they're breaking. Work needs to be done there. It's probably the least attractive piece of anything going on at that rec center right now. And so the project is much needed. The lighting needs to be improved. I think it accomplishes our goal of providing a facility that can be used from the time the facility opens until it closes, and it make people to go there, because right now a lot of people don't go to the locker rooms because they're not attractive, and they'll just come and go from the place, and you'll never see the locker room. And I think one of the things we're trying to do is to make this facility so that it could be used more completely. You can get ready in the morning if you want, or coming home from work, whatever. It provides that opportunity where under the current condition, it really is really an unattractive and inefficient way to use it. So it's still basically operating like a golf course locker room, where the golf course has been closed. And now, instead of focusing the locker room on the golf course, we're now focusing it on the rec center. And so I appreciate the work that both Brian, our president and vice president, did on this, and I think this is a really good project for us, and I look forward to it being done this summer, end of summer, actually.
Thank you, Cal. Anything further? I think this has the hallmarks of hitting a home run with what we're doing. And Cal pointed out we could have done a whole complete gut if we had our druthers. I think this is a good compromise. Any other questions? Mitch, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
We'll go to the Centennial Ice Arena Compressor Project. Chris?
Good evening, everybody. So, believe it or not, Centennial Ice Arena has been open for 47 years, dating back to 1973.
Wow.
And with the opening of those doors came a 3-compressor system to refrigerate what at the time was one full sheet of ice and a studio rink. The useful life for compressors is anywhere from 30 to 50 years. So doing the math, our compressors have been in use for now 47 years. Couple that with the United States commitment to the Montreal Protocol. Along with that is the phase out of R22, what is the current refrigerant used within our system. it's time for a new compressor system. With the replacement of compressors comes engineering design, removal of the current system, installation of new compressor, as well as upgrading the system controls. So as a reminder, in November, we went for RFQ, which we asked firms to submit qualifications based on experience. We received 2 proposals. With the board's approval, we contracted IB Story for the engineering and design work. As a reminder, IB Story has an extensive background and in fact are the recommended firm of the National Hockey League. So with that being said, we're at the point now where they have recommended a system to us, which is a 2-stage mag-bearing train compressor system using what's called Opteon XP10 or A10, which is also the recommended refrigerant of the NHL as well. Briefly, the benefits of this system are that they have a minimal footprint, which will eliminate any need for additional construction in what we call our ZAM room, which houses our compressor system. It comes with an industry-leading warranty, 10 years for parts and labor. It will also allow for us, should the board years from now decide to add a second sheet or re-implement the studio sheet, it will allow for that capacity. And it also has superior efficiency when compared to other one-stage model systems. We did receive initial construction documents from IB Story last night, and staff is working to schedule a call late this week or early next to discuss options and the next phases of the project. Financially, the project is budgeted in the capital plan in the amount of $1.5 million. The engineering service costs for IB Story, which were approved, are at $84,000. Based on our conversations with IB Story firm, the cost for the removal of the current system, installation of the new system, and the upgraded system controllers will be anywhere from $850,000 to $1 million, which therefore we anticipate the project to come in at or under budget. A brief timeline, where we're at right now is engineer design development and installation specs. Starting next month, we plan to go to permitting as well as bid for the actual equipment, removal of the current system, and installation of the new equipment. In April, we'll be coming to the board for approval of the actual bid and contract awarding. And June 1, we will begin installation of the new system with estimated finishing of the project July 31st in time for August 1 to reopen for hockey season and programming.
Excellent.
So with that being said, any questions?
I have a question.
Jerry?
It sounds great that that we're using these protocols and things like that that will help the environment. And doesn't it? I would assume it does the same effective job, if not better, than the 47-year-old compressor we have now.
Yeah. So what staff was educated on by IB Story is something that's called GWP, which is global warming potential. R22 has a current rating of 1,810. The refrigerant that we will be implementing in our system has a GWP of 573, so it's a 65% reduction in what's known to deplete the ozone.
So my question is, you mentioned something about it having the capacity to handle a second sheet of ice or a small, whatever, sort of thing. Does that mean we are purchasing this size compressor for that flexibility? If so, is there a smaller one that's available that's less expensive if we were only going to have one?
Yes, so there will be 2 options, and in fact, when we go to bid, we're going to have a secondary bid, if you will, for the 2-stage. What we were educated in discussion with Ian Story is that should we choose to go with the 2-stage or the 2-compressor model, we will receive, we'll see about a 10-year return on investment in terms of utility reduction costs. If we do go with just a 1-stage system, it will essentially consistently run, and we won't really see a reduction in utility costs. And it will also not allow for us ever to make that decision to implement a studio sheet or a second sheet if that ever really
It
becomes
might
a
be
necessity.
short-sighted to try to do it running max.
Yeah, we would see an initial savings of the project cost, but again, a 10-year ROI on adding a second stage Seems to be the wiser choice, but I can't make that decision. Yeah, and the system will last 50 years.
So I'm sorry, I think I heard you say that this, which I'll just say the larger system, actually will result in an energy savings.
Yes, and the difference between a one-stage and a two-stage with the energy savings, the ROI with that difference will be about 10 years. And as Brian said, the expected life of this system is 50.
Oh, that's great. So, starting day one, we have a lower electric bill
That's the goal.
and a better impact on the environment. Any other questions, Lori? Fly forward.
That's it. Thank you.
All right. So we are, unless there's something else, we will be open to the public to address the board. Are there members of the public who would like to address the board?
The patient public.
I was first on the list, I'll probably be brief. With regard to Rosewood, I'd like to compliment the staff. I think you guys did a good job. I absolutely spot on agree with what you're suggesting in the interpretive cove. The challenges of that cove of having the ravine exit in that cove makes it very hard to keep sand in it, and we'll see what happens. I think that we're in the second year of high water. I won't be a bit surprised if the water does actually not hit much higher than it already is. Right now, we have high levels largely because we have a warm winter, and the runoff has been keeping the lake levels high. I've been monitoring that for my own interests much more carefully than I've ever had in the past. I think Margaret has done a terrific job. One of the reasons I wanted to come tonight, I was very concerned about the possible inclusion of the underwater weirs. And the reason was that she had set the height for that at the low level of the lake, which we had only 7 years ago. And my biggest concern about that for a swimming beach would be in low levels of water, you would tend to have poor circulation and exchange of water in that cove. And that may not have been the most healthy way in which to have a swimming beach. With all of that said, the only suggestion I would, well, I also think that we should see what happens this year with the water levels before investing in revetment in the swimming beach. I understand the concern about protecting the infrastructure. It may not be necessary depending upon how deep the footings are for the boardwalk and the associated buildings. The only real suggestion I would make that you might want to consider is that once you have your full plan together, there are other coastal engineers in the Chicago area. It might be worthwhile to have someone outside of the Smith Group, and that's in spite of the fact that I really think Margaret is terrific. I think she's extremely bright. She's very knowledgeable. She's answered a lot of questions that I've had about the way in which beaches are developed and how they form, how they disappear, and it's been an education for me. And I think she's very bright, but it would not hurt to get confirmation. You're going to be spending a lot of money, and if this were a medical procedure, you might want to have a second opinion.
I think that's a very good point that David is
I
raising.
agree. Thanks,
One
Conrad.
of the few times I will agree with Mr. Sogan.
Don't tempt me, Brian.
I agree with them often.
I agree with Cal often.
My name is Leslie Barish. I'm here regarding Park Avenue Beach. And I just want to say that regarding the beach, the Park Avenue Beach, it seems like the board is not applying the same criteria for creating a budget for the Park Avenue Beach and boat ramp as it does for all of the other Park District facilities. And for example, the last few meetings I've been to, one of the reasons you gave us was that the boat ramp was not being used. It wasn't being used enough. And if not enough people use it, And according to the survey that you guys gave, it said 22% said they use it, but that wasn't enough. You said you couldn't justify the cost of $1.5 million to fix the barge. But per your 2020 budget and the online survey, this is not the same criteria used for any other facility that has the same or less usage rate. For instance, I'm just going to go through a real long list real quick. Moraine Park has less than a 5% usage rate per that survey, and you've committed $975,000 to fix it. Deer Creek Racquet Club has a 17% usage rate, and you've budgeted over $1 million in the course of 5 years. All these are over, it's your capital replacement plan over the 5 years. But Centennial Ice Arena, you know, it's about the same usage rate as the Park Avenue Beach. And over 5 years, you've budgeted $5.5 million to maintain and improve it. And actually, every facility with a usage rate between 14 and 26% has been budgeted for improvements, except for Park Avenue Beach. The other reason you gave us was that the Park Avenue Beach boat ramp isn't making any money. But the beach was basically, I think it was just breaking even, I mean, more or less. And the facilities you list, you know, online on your budget, there are 4 that operate at a loss, and those are Westridge, Heller, Rec Center, and Water Park. Yet you've committed to spend a total of $7.3 million over the next 5 years for these money-losing facilities. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying it's where, you know, you're not applying the same criteria to Park Avenue Beach. I feel that you need to fund the Park Avenue Beach boating facility and boat ramp the same way you budget for all other facilities. Park Avenue Beach and boat ramp are being used, and they are being used just as much as other facilities that you deem worth budgeting for. And so I hope that you allocate funds to fix the barge the way you fix, you know, all the other things that need to be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi guys, Steve Knapp. I think you guys all know where I stand on the boating facility. Very pro boating facility, fully agree with everything that was just said. But I'd really like to ask the board specifically right now, what we're seeing is emergency status on the south parking lot. I was hoping somebody has a recent picture that they can throw up. Has anybody got a picture of the south parking lot? I'm happy to show you guys. Do you have one, Jeff?
Let me right now.
No,
That's
we're
okay. I can
familiar
send
with
to
it.
you,
We're
but,
familiar
you know,
with
and
it,
I have
Steve.
one on my phone if anybody wants to talk to me after the meeting. But, you know, the hole in the parking lot is basically as big as this table. Okay, and it's not getting any smaller. So I'd really like to ask the board for some emergency money. You need to get something in there. I don't know whether it's, you know, the tetragon, what do we call them? Where's Chad? But there's also the barge bags, all these, there's many different plans for emergency, you know, erosion protection for such a structure. So, you know, this happens now and you pay a little, or you wait and you pay a lot. So I think that's the emergency. Thank you.
Peter Mordini, I live at 1853 Sheen Court, Highland Park. Just a couple of things to touch on. I guess one was Rosewood. It's great that everyone's jumping on that, and I'd like to see that as well. Just a quick note, if Margaret ever looked at the Fort Sheridan Cove there that we pass by very frequently, it's just a few minutes up the beach there. And the way they designed that cove was a little bit smaller mouth, a little higher as far as the rocks. But I think the important thing, what they did there, and that beach is still holding and circulates sand fine, is they laid underground boulders, not underground, under the water boulders in a staggered position so things can circulate, but yet it'll break the wave. It's very cheap. It's just laying some bigger rocks there, but just a thought that if that was ever looked at and how they designed that and who designed it, that may help Rosewood. And going back on Lori's point, and Steve's point, I guess it's out now that Illinois, Chicago and Lake Cook, or Lake County, is eligible for this emergency erosion help. So this is a great opportunity. We haven't heard that. Are you guys looking for Park Avenue for some erosion money with the federal money?
Yes.
Yeah. That would be,
We
yeah.
applied.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just don't hear it from, we just want to hear it from you guys if the ball's rolling on that, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, for the parking lot, for the beach, and, I guess the barge is I don't know how that falls into play, but just a heads up and see what's going on with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Brian, can you tell us just real briefly about you applied, or when's the deadline, when do you expect to hear back?
Yeah, I'll have Jeff give a quick update on that.
Yes, so it was IEMA, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, reached out. It was specifically related to the storm event in January. And so we had to look into some repair costs for the parking lot incident that was while the parking lot. The issues that weren't initiated from that storm, it certainly made it worse. And so we've included that in that ask right now. What they're trying to do is get enough in our county to try to eventually get federal funding for that. We submitted that last week. We haven't heard anything yet. So there's no official timeline associated with that.
And we also participate in communication with our legislators for state and federal funding, as other communities are and the city of Chicago has, so.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Please come up, state your name, address.
Hi, my name is Noelle Vaughn. I live at 2691 Oak Street in Highland Park.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Noelle Vaughn. And just two things relating to Park Avenue Beach. One is the usage survey was looking at the barge use or the boat launch use per boat. And as you know, typically boaters, for safety reasons, don't go out alone. So the usage rate that was quoted earlier is realistically much higher than that. If you look at individual people rather than boats. And that's something that needs to be really considered because you're talking about individual Highland Park residents of multiple ages. Additionally, it is wonderful and I commend you for being so focused on environmental sustainability and looking at whether it's the HVAC or solar panels, and I commend the board on that. Really, when you're talking about Park Avenue Beach, the fact that we have the boat launch protects the ability not just of motorboaters, but really of sailboaters who don't use any other power other than the wind, paddleboarders that don't use any other power. So it really is also in line with the focus of environmental sustainability, to make sure that boat launch, for the safety and for the enjoyment of boats that are not gas powered, to be able to have easy access to the lake. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Knapp, and I'm at 700 College Place. And I'm a taxpayer and a pay-to-play citizen. I pay to play at 3 facilities at Highland Park. I'm disappointed that the Park District doesn't take care of their existing structures and seems to be very reactive, and especially when the structures fail. One example would be the Danny Knuff Bridge in 2017. My son would always ride his bike on it and go across it, and when it collapsed, I was glad that he was not on it. The Park Avenue Breakwater and Barge is another facility, a structure that it's old, had minimal cost when it went in, but maintenance was halted around 2014, and maybe we could have had more years of happy boating and time to assess and plan for the end of the life of that barge. Now we have at most 4 years, and due to lack of planning and before the barge might fail, the beach might get washed out, the parking lot will be gone. The Park District should commit to taking care of its existing structures before forging ahead and building multi-million-dollar golf courses, swimming beaches, and community park. It's also clear that you have taken designated funds from Park Avenue Boating Beach and are putting them into fixing inadequate designs at Rosewood and for purchasing things like solar panels. I am pleased to be a part of the Park Avenue Boating Facility Working Group, but that is just one small step to planning and fixing your existing structures. The board does need to say yes to the recommendations that come before them, and especially Smith Group has already come before you in 2018 with designs for barge replacement. What the taxpayers want is a commitment that you do not walk away from your parks and abandon them. What I would like is a commitment from the Park District and from the board that Park Avenue Boating Beach, a very beloved park, is not being abandoned. And I'd like you to show your commitment. I ask that you would put money into the 5-year capital budget now and show that you do have good faith in properly managing your existing recreation sites. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Do any commissioners have anything that they'd like to add, to speak to?
Move to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
No closed?
We are adjourned at 8:04.
Thank you.